We now continue with our discussion on Ultratech Cement, and we will, in this particular section, start working on a Capex schedule. So we have already done the major projections for the revenue and cost drivers, and now we are going to focus our attention towards the Capex schedule. You'll see a new sheet has been added to the worksheet that we are working on, and it at this point of time just kind of has all the data points. As we have looked at about, we just put the headers there. Right now we're going to put in the Capex schedule for the company, looking at the last few annual reports. And just like we have seen in other companies, the Capex schedule is going to be a direct function of the capacity that the company has. We already know the total capacity of the company is available here in these sections, and we are now going to basically put in the gross fixed assets number. What we have in the balance sheet is the net fixed assets number, tangible fixed assets number, and some capital work in progress. We are now going to focus on the gross fixed asset number and work with that, right? So that's what we are going to identify. Let's go to the annual report, and in the notes to the financial statements, we will find fixed assets somewhere here, right? So we will look at all the total tangible assets and total intangible assets, and total assets is given here, and then the depreciation and amortization is given here, and the net block is given here. So we find this is the total gross fixed assets, this number here is the depreciation and amortization, and this is the net fixed assets, 22532, right? Let's see if we can put these numbers in. So gross long-term assets, this includes tangible plus intangible, accumulated depreciation, and net long-term assets. This again includes tangible plus intangible. So can I find the net long-term assets that's available with us? And that's basically for 2013, this plus this, right? And I can drag it ahead because for the last 4 years we have this number which is available to us. We are now going to look at what is the number available for the gross data, right? And that's what we are going to kind of plug in. Before we do that, let's format all this and put this here. Yeah. Now we're going to look at what's going to be the data around gross long-term assets. So that data is available here. Let's see where that comes out and also check the number here. So we get 22533. That's the number here, 22533, right at the bottom right corner of the screen, 22533, right? So 34567, this number is 34567, and the accumulated depreciation is 12034, and so we will get this number, right? Similarly, for the year before this, do we have the data for the year before this? That's the data for the year before this, 31874 last year. So that's 31874 and 10927, 10927, right? That's the data that we have for the company, and we can find the difference of these two. That should actually give the same, or what I can do is this, and the number stays the same, and the number stays the same, right? So if I change the formula now, it still gives me the same number which was there earlier. Now we're going to put in the number for 2013-14 as well. For this, we're going to open the annual report for 2013-14, and we have tangible assets in note number 11. So let's go to note number 11 and quickly find those. So gross block, total tangible and intangible assets, 25078. So I'm going to put in 25078 and 9206. So this is 25078 and 9206. And does the number still remain 872, 15872? It does. So when we drag the formula on the back, it stays the same number. And similarly, previous year numbers are available here. So that's 21382. I can go and plug in 21382, and we can plug in the depreciation number, which is 8260. So we put in 8260, and if I drag this formula on the left, it remains the same, right? So we have the gross fixed assets now. Now, in this kind of a case, the gross fixed assets should depend on the capacity. Remember, this is in INR crore. All these numbers are in INR crore. We can say what is the capacity of the company, right? What is the capacity of the company that we can plug in? And that's in million tons per annum, and that's available on the assumption schedule, right? Right at the top, we have the assumption schedule available, and that's the capacity of the company. Can we find out gross long-term assets per million ton capacity, right? How much assets are needed to put up 1 million ton of capacity? So I can just divide. It takes about 400 crores to put up 1 million ton capacity. That number continues to go up, and that's possibly because more capacity expansion is underway, right? More capacity expansion is underway. So already assets might have come in, but the entire production may not have started at this point, right? So that's the data that we have. About 500 crore odd rupees would be needed to set up 1 million ton of capacity. Now, if the company says next year we're going to add another 2 to 3 million tons, we know what is going to be the capex on account of that, right? We know what is going to be the capex on account of that. So that's broadly the capex that we look at. Now, once we put in this assumption here, we should be able to kind of say what is the capex on account of new capacity and on account of maintenance, right? And I can put INR crore here and here. The maintenance capex is nothing but what's going to happen to depreciation for this company, right? So let's freeze the cells here. What's going to happen to depreciation of this company? So let's put depreciation numbers INR crore, and I'm going to plug them in from the P&L schedule. So that's where we have the depreciation and amortization expense, and let's drag it here. Let's format it. Now let's try and find out depreciation as percentage of gross LT assets, right? And that's this divided by my gross long-term assets, which is 21,382. Roughly about 4% is what we'll get as the number. And let's see what we get. We get 4% every year. Give or take a few numbers here or there. Approximately 3.5 to 4%. Basically tells you that all the assets have roughly about 25 years of useful life, right? So that's the depreciation. And all I'm going to do is last year depreciation is going to come and plug in here as this year capex. We still do not have the data for 2017, so obviously 2017 annual report is not yet out. So it continues to be a projection year for us. We can check those numbers that we project based on what their overall statements they've reported for the first few quarters of results in this particular financial year. But primarily we don't have that data as of now, right? So that's the depreciation as a percentage of long-term assets. I can plug that in, and that will give us the capex schedule, and that will give us, if we make a projection for next year, what is going to be the depreciation, right? So that's the first stage that we get to in terms of a capex schedule that comes out. Now, if the company adds capacity, we know for every million ton, roughly about 500 crore of capex is needed, and we know there is capex on account of depreciation that is needed. So that solves our purpose in terms of the capex. Now, interestingly, this company also has debt. They have long-term borrowings that we see here, right? And we also see some other current liabilities, and we remember there was some current portion of long-term borrowings which was there in other current liabilities. And what was that? That was money that was supposed to be returned this year, right? But has not been returned so far. So we are going to look at what is the approximate debt that the company has, and we'll try and calculate a debt to equity ratio of the company and see whether that makes sense, and if there is some sense on how the total assets are moving, and how the company has been increasing its debt over the years. The debt equity ratio is what we're going to work with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to Capex and debt schedule. I'm going to make this sheet's name as Capex and debt schedule, and I'm going to look at long-term borrowings, and I'm going to look at current portion of long-term borrowings, right? INR crore. This is straight away available in the balance sheet. I can just go and plug this number in for the long-term borrowings. This number reduces, obviously, because some part of the borrowing is supposed to be repaid this year, but that's not going to get repaid completely. You're going to borrow or reissue that capital. So let's go and look at my short-term borrowings and other current liabilities. That's, remember, for 2014-15. So you'll see the first line item here, current maturity of long-term debt, 327 and 946. 327 and 946, and this is for 2014 and 13. So we have 327 and 946. So let's plug in these numbers. For 13 we have, so this is 327 and this is 946, right? For the current year, let's put in these numbers from the annual report, and again it should be available here itself. Other current liabilities, 2831 and 902. So this is 902 and 2831. So can I find total long-term borrowings? Why did I take this? Why did I take this term? Is because this is actually long-term debt, but is just being payable in that year. So the total long-term debt is going to be at any point of time the sum of these two, correct? And we will see that will start appearing either stable or increasing a little bit. First 2 years it is stable, then it increases, because that's the years where capacity comes in. So they must have borrowed money to fund this expansion, correct? And I can also find out debt to equity ratio, and I'm going to use the total debt divided by my balance sheet equity value, which is net worth, share capital plus surplus, and that stays at around 0.29, 0.26. Why did we do this? The reason we did this was that next time onwards, or let's put it this way, if I add a decimal point, it's about 0.3, which means next year, if my total capex is going to be, let's say, 1000 crore, I will probably assume that there is going to be a 30% debt in that. They have maintained a debt equity ratio of 30/70. So it's possibly going to be a scenario that 30% of that is going to be debt when it comes. Remember, this is debt equity ratio, sorry, so it's not 30/70. Debt divided by equity is 0.3. So we probably will see that the company will manage that as we go along in subsequent years as well. So we can add a line item called new debt raised, and that will become a function of how much is the total capital being raised, right? I can also actually just insert another row and calculate the debt to capital ratio, right? So that's equal to 4840 divided by 4840 plus the equity component. Debt by debt plus equity. That's what we are looking at, right? So roughly you will note that this number is going to be 20% of the total capital. So if you raise 1000 crore, 200 crore will be on account of debt. That's the assumption we are putting in for subsequent years when we do the capex. So that brings in our discussion around debt as well. And while we are building the debt scenario, we should also, just for argument's sake, put in the short-term borrowings number as well in INR crore, so that we can also plug in the interest cost for the firm. So these are the short-term borrowings. I'm going to plug that in from the balance sheet, and let's put in what is the interest cost for the firm in INR crore. That's available on the P&L. That's the finance cost that we see, right? So we plug in the finance cost here, and now let's try and find out interest cost as percentage of debt. This, remember, will be total long-term and short-term debt. So this divided by 569 plus my long-term borrowings, and I find they're paying 4%, which seems just a little bit odd because they should be paying more, something to the tune of 7 to 8%. And that's possibly because they have either some foreign loans, or these loans came into the books just towards the end of the year. That's possibly one of the causes, but interest rate should be about 7 to 8% for this company. And that's what we are going to look at as we go along. We can actually check where are these long-term borrowings from and how many of these are in foreign currency. And you do see that that your foreign currency loans are about 1282, right? So there is a reasonable chunk of foreign currency loan, and that's going to be, and in fact there's more. So there's term loans here, and there is some non-convertible debentures, and total loans in foreign currency, local currency, if you add up, is in the long-term debt is a substantial chunk in foreign currency loans. There is at least half of the loans coming from foreign currency, and that's what results in the lower interest rate that the company shows, right? So that's basically the debt schedule and the capex schedule. We have most of the data around the debt and capex schedule available with us. We can now go ahead and start projecting the data for subsequent years, because we do have data around the capacity of the company. We do have data around what's going to be the numbers for the company in subsequent years, right? So that's broadly it in this particular video. Thank you.